Hi, I'm Walt Peterson of Strange Light Studios. My partner B and I recently sat down with Steve Bassett. He's the executive director of the Paradigm Research Group, a longtime UAP advocate, as well as a co-founder of the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. We talked to Steve about the UAP Disclosure Amendment and the possibility of official disclosure of UFOs by the American government. Steve has done over 1,200 interviews, has been covered by the New York Times, CNN, and many other news organizations. We really enjoyed our conversation with Steve. I hope you do too.
I do everything that activists do to try to get authority to do something it doesn't want to do. That's what all activism is about, right? It's all the activist movements of the 20th century pretty much comes down to the same thing. Government has doing something one way and you want it to change, right? Or it's not doing something at all and you want it to start. In this case, the issue is the truth embargo on the extraterrestrial presence, which the government has now maintained for 76 years and still does maintain to this day, though it's falling apart, obviously. And that policy was profound. It had all kinds of implications and impacts. It altered the course of the 20th century, maybe for worse, probably for worse. Now, of course, it's 23 years into the 21st century. And my job has always been to help end that policy. And that's what I do in every way possible. Registering as a lobbyist, setting up a PAC, holding conferences, going to conferences, doing podcasts, writing, whatever it takes. And that I've been doing it now for 26 years.
Steve, can you let us know what originally made you passionate about this work?
It's a fairly mundane thing in the sense that when I was young, I read lots of science fiction. I liked that. I didn't like other stuff. It just bored me. So I was like, right away, I'm going towards science. So I studied physics in school and got a degree in that and went about doing my life. But I always noted the ET issue. I always noted the UFO issue. It would turn up in newspapers and articles all the time. In fact, there's been a huge amount of coverage of the subject going back, I think, right back to the articles that were printed because of the press release that was put out by the Army Air Force Base at Roswell in 47.
Right.
So there's been plenty of coverage, and I'd see it, and I read it, and I just read it without bias. I had no reason to think, well, one way or the other. And it was obvious, based on common sense, and what I was seeing. Clearly, this was an extraterrestrial thing. It was not human. It was obvious to me as a teenager, but so what? I have a lot of things to deal with when you're a teenager, and then life comes on, and you got to deal with that, and the years go by. And I would always note, and I read a couple of books along the way, never joined anything, never got directly involved until 1995. And in the fall of 95, I reached one of those points that people often do in life when they realize they really are not happy with everything that's happened previously. They don't have a lot of time left. And if you want to do something, you need to do it now. And I thought about it gave it, some serious thought for a couple of months. And it was, when you're in that frame of mind, you become open to things. When you get to that point, right? And as it happened, it was right about then I read the book Abduction by John Mack. I'd read a few other books, but this one really affected me. Mack was a very highly esteemed individual with the Pulitzer Prize for writing a book on T.E. Lawrence. He was a Harvard-trained psychologist. He was the head of psychiatry, I think, at the Cambridge Hospital. And I'm going, my God, if someone like him is actually dealing with contactees, which I had read about that, I read Strieber, and trying to do a full scientific approach to it at an organization he set up in Cambridge, this thing is happening.
Right. And he originally set out to disprove experiencers, right?
Not exactly. John Mack had heard about it, but had no reason to engage it per se. He was, I guess you could say, skeptical, but simple skeptical is nothing. I mean, he'd heard some stories about people having this experience, and he has no basis to have an opinion one way or the other. So he was simply skeptical and not engaging it. However, he was based up in Cambridge. There were people approaching him and saying, "You need to look at this. You need to look at this." And being a highly intelligent and thoughtful person whose life had been devoted to helping others through his work, he decided, "Okay, I'll look at it." And I don't know all the details, but I know that in short order, he ended up at the home of Bud Hopkins in New York, right? Who I think was living was it Greenwich? He might have been in Greenwich. I'm not sure. To talk to him personally. And the story goes, I don't know if it's really accurate. I think it's accurate. Leslie Kane might know, and that is that. So he's talking to Bud, and Bud is telling him about some of the letters he gets from so many people, and John says, "Oh, really? Can I read some of those?" And Bud says, "Sure. Just go over to the closet there. There's a whole bunch of a big stack of unopened letters. God knows how many. Just open a few at random and read them." And so this is like unfiltered, right? So he opens up a few and reads them, and boom. I think right then and there he realized, I need to get into this, and it's something like that. It's an apocryphal story, but I like it. And so he starts engaging the issue formally, and it's not long before he realizes that I think he comes to the clear idea that these are truthful stories. Now, that doesn't mean you simply say, "Oh, fine," but he starts a process of engaging and working with contactees, not so much to disprove them, but to build a scientific inquiry that could be published in peer-reviewed journals, which he did get, I think, at least one, maybe two of those published. And so that book affected me. And I was at that point in life when whatever it takes, I've got to change course. And I had learned a few things in my life, and that something that I had not known or understood as a young man. I wish the hell I had. I wish every parent would teach their kids this, or at least explain this to them. That there's really nothing you can't get involved in if you're willing to volunteer. If you have to get a paycheck, then you just narrow way down the number of options you have. But if you're willing to volunteer and do what it takes, there's almost no place you can't go. And so I got in touch with him because at the back of the book Abduction was the address and phone number. And I had a certain, I guess, fire in me. Somehow I convinced them, let me work for you, volunteer as a somewhat production type, a development type person based on my background in business. And they agreed. And I drove across country and spent 5 months at PEER, the Program for Extraordinary Experience Research. That's how I got started. It was a great introduction. It was exciting, but it wasn't a fit. And so up there, I had to make the decision what to do next. And it just hit me. I was sitting in my office looking out the window, and it just hit me. Boom. I'd already concluded that the problem wasn't science. The proof was everywhere. And so if the problem isn't science, if it's been established by the evidence, why is it contained? Politics. It was a political decision, national security based. And therefore, the only way to solve this is not to pile evidence on top of evidence, but to go after the political decision. And I said, well, how could I do that? And then it occurred to me, well, I know Washington. I've been in and out of it my whole life. My family, we've been there since 1920. And I said, wow, I bet nobody's ever registered as a lobbyist. In fact, I was certain I hadn't, because there's no money in it. Who wants to not be paid to be ridiculed when you could be a real lobbyist and get rich? I said, I'll be the first. And so I hustled on down to Washington, set up in one of the family homes, set up an office, filed as a lobbyist, knowing that the Washington Post would figure it out at some point. And they did, and they sent a reporter and did a big article with a big photo, stuck it on the front page of the business section. And my career as a political activist in this issue was launched. It's that simple.
You talked about John Mack, and there's, another person in kind of psychology that discussed the subject, which is Carl Jung's last book, I think, was called UFOs. And I was having a conversation with a friend, and he brought that book up, and that book talks about how it's a projection and all this other stuff. But have you seen the letter of Carl Jung sent, and it was actually kind of talking about his belief in UFOs at the end of his life.
The letter, remind me, the letter was sent to who?
It was, I'm blanking on it right now.
I think I have seen it. What was the essence of the letter? That he had come to a conclusion
it was a physical phenomena, essentially.
Okay, that's good. I'm glad. Again, he was before John's time in a way.
Yeah.
And he didn't have access to much information, nothing like John had. But he's a brilliant man. And the fact that if he realized it was physical at the end, good for him.
Mm-hmm.
John carried forward, did the work, and then just one of the great tragedies.
Yeah.
He was late at night. He made an accident. I almost got killed in the Cayman Islands exactly the same way. I came with 1 second of dying. I had been down there for 2 days. I had a car provided for me, but down there they drive on the left and the steering wheel's on the right. And I said, I can do this. I can do this. And I was fine. But on the second day, I met somebody at one of the resorts to discuss things. And as I'm pulling out of the parking lot, I looked left and not right. And I had only moved a few feet when a substantial truck went by at 50 miles an hour. It was so close, I thought it hit the bumper. And it went by, and I stopped, and then I pulled out. And as I'm going down the road, I started doing the math. And I realized I came less than 1 second from pulling out a little sooner. I get hit at 50 miles an hour, no braking, by a truck on the driver's side. I'm dead. I'm dead in probably an instant. That happened to me.
Mm.
Wow.
John stepped out in front of a truck because he looked left late at night, and I went to the exact place where it happened to feel it, to be there and see what it was like. And the driver didn't even have a chance to brake. He was dead before he hit the pavement. It was an accident. Terrible, terrible, tragic accident. He was tired, and, well, we lost him. He'd be 95 now. He might have made it to 95, to be honest with you. He was in great shape, but we lost him. And so it was tough. But he was absolutely instrumental in my getting involved. And I think John Mack helped a lot of people get involved in this, and also helped a lot of contactees come forward and out of the closet and speak up. Of course, there are others that have done the same thing, but Mack is the reason I got into this. Ultimately, it was his book that did
Wow.
Another thing that we would love to discuss with you is the UAPTA. And for those who are unfamiliar, can you explain what that is?
The UAP Act?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. This is the big thing going on right now. Mm-hmm. It is a big thing. The truth embargo is coming down. It's almost done. It's hanging by a thread. There's some resistance in there. I knew there would be at the very last. It's like football. You march up the field, but when you get the red zone, in that 10, 12, 15-yard line zone, it gets a lot tougher, right? This is the nature of football. Well, it's the nature of a lot of things. So we're near the goal line, and there's a little resistance. But over the last 3 years, exactly, 3 tranches of legislation were passed by the Congress and signed by the president. Prior to the first one, which was signed in 2020, there had never been a piece of legislation on this issue ever. I think there was a couple of odd items that have turned up in some legislatures in other countries. I haven't researched it, but it wouldn't surprise me. But in terms of the U.S., nothing. Each one of these tranches was bigger than the last. So the second one was twice the size of the first. Third one was twice the size of the third. And the fourth was going to be twice the size of that. But, well, let's just say that the fourth legislation, which was sponsored by Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and Senator Michael Rounds of the Armed Services Committee, in conjunction with the sponsor of the bill, which I believe is Senator Reid. This legislation was the culmination of the 3 years. And the 4 bills together created, if passed, if the fourth one was passed, as is, created all of the infrastructure, all of the legal infrastructure necessary to prepare the United States for disclosure. Meaning everything was in place. Obviously, an office has been set up called the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. And that had evolved over 3 years. There had been plenty of discussions and briefings. The Congress was well up to speed, multiple classified reports, as well as scores of private meetings with witnesses. All of that was done. And then the legislation established literally the entire process by which everything the government knows about this phenomena, everything the government has done with respect to this phenomena, including actual materiel and bodies, the whole 9 yards, everything. It describes how all of that would eventually come out of the secret classified arena into public space and then ultimately archived in the National Archives. The whole enchilada. How long it would take, don't know. It could take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, but that process would start immediately or shortly after the act was passed. In other words, it's ballgame. And that, of course, was necessary, not because the government wanted to find out about this phenomenon. They already knew about it. It's been known about it since the 40s, but because the disclosure of the ET presence, confirmation event by the President of the United States, is closing fast. I mean, the ability of the president to stay out of this, which they have for all of these years, is just evaporating. And it's going to force the president's hand. And if that happens, whatever causes that, the next day, the United States government is going to have to deal with a country of 330 million people, and to some degree, a planet of 8 billion, is going to want to know everything immediately. And the pressure and the legal and all the other implications of this will be enormous. And so they had to have all this in place before the president makes that confirmation. And that this LACT Act completed it. So not surprisingly, there was pushback. And one of the reasons there was pushback is that Senator Schumer he threw the long ball, as they say in football. He went for the touchdown, okay? And he put in the bill deliberately the strongest possible language relative to the modus or the raison d'etre of this bill, which is how do we get everything to the public as soon as possible, as safely as possible, as quickly as possible, and so forth. And so the bill included subpoena power for a number of key members of Congress, as well as a 9-person review board appointed by the president, the highest classification status, including special access in existence for certain members of the oversight process, so that they could technically have no limitations on where they go and who they talk to.
And they actually changed up some of the language and removed some of those, correct?
I'm getting there.
Okay.
So it included that, right? The review board, subpoena power, and this was the one that really flipped the switch. Eminent domain over all non-human technologies, meaning extraterrestrial technologies and any bodies that are still around. And that literally landed in the realm of the government contractors like an ontological bomb. They have been waiting patiently, decade after decade, while continuing to do work and study and analysis of this technology, as well as any scientific understandings that they could evolve. They have been given untold billions of dollars to do this, going back to the 40s. And there is certainly embedded in this truth a potential to make huge sums of money, massive amounts of money, which I'm sure they'd like to have been doing years ago, but they couldn't, because to go out and try to develop ET-derived technology ends the truth embargo. Because there's just no way you're going to pull that off, and people are not going to say, where'd you get that? And so they had to wait and wait and wait. And suddenly Schumer says the government owns it all. Okay. In other words, if we want it, we can get it. Until then, at least until we make that choice, you need to give us a full report of everything you have. And that means that if they don't report it, if they hide it to use later, they're violating the law. They can go to prison. And so they said, oh, no, 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 no. And so they immediately, as soon as that language came out, which was it was announced in July 14, over the next couple of months, they started working with their intermediaries who have contacts with members of Congress. They were certainly targeting those who were going to be in the conference to reconcile the House and Senate bill. And they said, look, go in there and make it clear that that cannot stand, that this bill has got to be changed. So on the one hand, it resulted in a lot of disappointment. On the other hand, Schumer deliberately, I think, smoked them out. He forced the civilian world that has been dealing with this issue under government contract in the highest classifications to come out of the closet and exercise their prerogative to change that bill, even though they're not named, even though nobody has gone public personally. Everybody knows who was pressing on that bill. And if you're a government contractor like Lockheed Martin and you're pressing against eminent domain for non-human technology, that says that you have non-human technology, which is what Schumer confirmed when he asked for the eminent domain. It's what Grusch confirmed when he would testify. In fact, it's hardly possible to find anybody in Washington now that isn't prepared to go, oh, yeah, we've got non-human technology, which means that disclosure, informal disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence has kind of happened. I mean, it's happened. All right. But it's informal. All right. It's like a lot of people, at various points of the 20th century, going around the country, saying this and saying that about it. Got to go to war with this person, got to go to war here. We got to declare war. We got to go to war. But we don't go to war. Why? Only the Congress can declare war. And the president executes that declaration. So anybody can run around saying anything they want about war. It doesn't count. Same thing for this. Until the president confirms this issue, 90% plus, 90+% of everything that needs to happen and should happen will not happen. So that's what's coming. So now, where are we? Here's where we are. On my website at paradigmresearchgroup.org, you gotta learn how to spell paradigm. It's going to be a huge word soon. Paradigmresearchgroup.org, front page. You don't have to scroll down very far. You will see links. I hope the links are correct. I haven't had a chance to check them. To the Senate version of the bill. On the left and on the right is the final bill language, which is what would be signed by the president. And I have converted both of them into easy to read format and included highlights of areas I consider particularly interesting. So you can go and you can look at both bills and you can compare them. All right. And there's a summary of the changes. And here's the message that I want to get out. I mean, I was not happy. And I have launched, I was not happy. And I went public with a lot of complaints and concerns and my information was a little wobbly. And so I had to kind of step back. But here's where we're at. The major provisions, eminent domain, subpoena power, review board, right? And this is one I'm missing. And the review board, right? Which is a big deal. The presidential review board and eminent and subpoena power for not only the review board, but also for members of certain key committees is gone. It's completely stripped out, which essentially takes a great deal of pressure off of those inside, working inside and underneath the truth embargo.
And they also removed criminal penalties as well, I believe.
No. The criminal penalties issue was brought up in the third bill.
Okay.
So that's already there. Well, criminal penalties for interference and this and that, it has been mentioned before. It may be that they put a couple of items also took out from under that as possible, but they haven't stripped it out completely. But I'll read it again. So those are the major things. But here is the good news. And they had no choice. When you read the bill as passed or is about to be passed, you will find that a lot of the key fundamental substance is there. All right. In terms of bringing the information out of the secret world through some review process of some kind, and then eventually ending up in the National Archives. In fact, the bill is really big on we're going to bring stuff out and really big on where it's going to land. But what it's not big on is the nature of the review process. They've left that a lot more flexible. All right. And also been very, very firm on the postponement of privileges and abilities and so forth. They put a lot more emphasis on the ability to hold things back, stripped out most of the what we'll call power that anybody but them have to really force the action. But they do describe the process. And essentially, the bill wants the same thing. Theoretically, the stuff's got to come out of the secret world, get revealed to the public, and end up in the archives. And this starts 30 days after the bill is passed at whatever pace, I guess, that the infrastructure wants to maintain, but most people want it immediately. And so in that sense, there's a lot there, all right? And so I'm not that displeased. And again, it indicates that this issue is taking another serious step towards disclosure, right? And so I'm not that unhappy now that I've seen the actual language. I recommend people go read it. But of course, something else is about to happen. And but I'll take a moment, let you ask some questions, and I'll go into that something else.
Yeah, I guess I think a lot of people last night watched News Nation, the Grusch interview, where he revealed that he does in fact have firsthand knowledge. Do you think that was something that he decided to come forward and do because of the UAPTA, or do you think that just it happened? He got approved and then it would just happen to time up like that?
I don't know, but I know that Grusch, I'm sure, favored the initial bill. Grusch wants disclosure as soon as possible. And so by giving that interview, he's just pushing back, making it clear. Grusch has now been completely validated. In other words, he says I was told we had non-human tech and bodies by firsthand sources. I then confirmed that with many of my contacts that I developed over the years working in intelligence, and many of them confirmed it as well. I then went forward and told the Intel committee about that, and eventually I told the world about that, and he got some grief. All right. And Schumer came out and said, we want eminent domain over that non-human tech that Grusch was talking about. That confirmed him. The pushback against the bill by the government contractors has confirmed it. So Grusch is a national hero. He may get a Presidential Medal of Freedom. And he is, I have been told he is still getting threats. He's not completely clear of that yet, because there are people that there's certain types of people inside the government will always view him as a traitor. All right. So, and he isn't, but still, he is a whistleblower, as he stated, which means that the policy is illegal and I'm spilling the beans. Right. But he made it clear when he made this testimony under oath before the oversight subcommittee that he did review in an appropriate way what he was going to say, and he essentially was green lighted to say X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, and E, and not been able to say publicly F, G, H, and I. And so when he got asked about F, G, H, and I, he did what you're supposed to do, was he said, I cannot do that in public session. I can go into a classified setting. But of course, in the way he responded to those questions, he kind of told you what the answer was. So his testimony was historic. I was very pleased to be in the room at the time and watching it firsthand. And so he's already vindicated, but he's got a lot more vindication coming. And so the fact that Grusch, I can't keep up. I haven't seen it because I can't keep up. I cannot keep up with scores and scores and scores of YouTube videos, the interviews, and everything else happening on a regular basis. The articles are piling up. I've got another 70 to load up in my archive. I've got 70 I haven't posted yet. It's a fire hose, which it means, again, those that are clinging to the truth embargo until the very end need to let it go, right? Need to let it go because it's.
I noticed something similar in what you were talking about with the UAP Act and the Grusch, which is that Grusch talks about the fact that his whole process of getting the information he was going to talk about cleared was in a way a catch-22 for because they could deny it and classify certain aspects, which in a certain sense proves there's something there. A similar way with the UAP Act. Now that it's been changed and some language has been taken out, it's like almost it does prove something, like you're saying. It is in a sense a type of disclosure. It's like a game of chess is being played or something like that.
Oh yeah, they kind of want a victory here. It may be that. Look, I wouldn't be shocked if, well, I mean, look at this. Let's go to the next step. Here's what's going to happen next. Okay. If you, and I need to get this up on the front page of my website, but it's all over my social media and Twitter. I just launched a few days ago an activist project designed to help make sure the next step takes place. And that step has been on hold for months, waiting for the bill to pass. And I get that. I think that it might have happened much earlier, but this year has been, again, dramatic. It's just one dramatic year after another, isn't it? Particularly politically. And what needs to happen is political. And so it was delayed. But in a sense, it's not a bad thing because, again, it's not unreasonable to wait until after this bill was passed, the final piece of the puzzle. And it is a pretty big piece. It's still missing a few things, but it's a pretty big piece. And so what is supposed to happen next, what has been promised, is that the Senate Intelligence Committee, which has been the lead on this from the get-go, all the legislation was sponsored out of the Intelligence Committee, modified a little bit in reconciliation, but essentially it is a Senate Intel Committee-driven process, the most powerful and bipartisan committee in the Congress. Well, considered. Let me put it this way. Not saying it's the most powerful, but the most important and most bipartisan committee in Congress. There are scores of witnesses ready and wanting to testify before that committee and no other committee. Now, Grusch testified before the Oversight Subcommittee because he wanted to testify. He wanted to testify as soon as possible. And to their great credit, Congressman Burchett, Mace, and Luna, and a few others said, great, let's do it. And they brought together a half-day hearing. For Grusch, they got for sure. And I think once they got Grusch, Fravor and I think Graves were more than happy to join them, to fill it out a little bit. But his testimony was key. That was the reason for it. And so, but that's not the hearing that has to happen to allow the president to confirm the extraterrestrial presence. It has to be in front of the Senate Intel Committee. And that's where the witnesses want to testify. And I don't mean 30. Now, they don't need 30. They will and should select from the group the strongest, most convincing, most impacting witnesses. Almost all are military. All have taken an oath to serve. They'll be taking another oath when they sit down or when they come to the committee. And so I happen to know kind of what that testimony will be, and it will essentially blow the truth embargo apart. Ball game. How much? A week, tops. A week is all we need.
Wow.
Right? Morning, afternoon sessions. Could be anywhere from, well, I would think 2 witnesses average per session. So you're talking about essentially 20 witnesses. Once that hearing is held, and it must be held in January, the president will very comfortably be able to step into the East Room of the White House in front of a lot of press. Probably they know something big is coming, but they won't know. Probably won't know. They can guess, but there won't be any pre-announcement.
Right. So You had been hinting at something in January, so this is what you're actually referring to?
Absolutely. And so he can confirm the ET presence right there. And that's it. That's disclosure, capital D. That is the end of the pre-disclosure world and the beginning of the post-disclosure world. It is the most profound event in human history when it takes place. It is the summum bonum of the biggest news story in history, and it's the beginning of another era that could change the world. That's all that will happen when the president makes that announcement. But he can't make it until the Senate holds that hearing. And so my concern is that it's so hard to do these kinds of things. It's so big. It's easy to delay it. And so I have launched a shift storm. Make sure you get that F in there. Shift storm. Okay. You can find it at shiftstorm.org. Okay. It's got its own webpage. I've got it up on all social media. I'm about to obviously get the link up on the top of Paradigm Research Group's main page. And this is simple, basic activism. All right. All I want to do, all I'm asking, right, is that while focusing on 3 people who are not the bad guys, they are the good guys. And I'm talking about Senator Schumer, Senator Warner, and Senator Rubio. All right. Focusing on these 3 congressional offices, using Twitter and Twitter tagging, where you write a message and tag somebody, in this case, tag Senator Schumer, tag Senator Rubio or Warner and I have provided obviously the Twitter handles for them and right in the postings, though you can easily find it. You go at Senator Schumer. Sir, we really want hearings in January. It's important these witnesses be able to testify. We are very much pleased with all the work that you've done. Your act would have been great, but it's still looking good. We want hearings. We want 200,000 of these tag messages to hit their notification box by the end of the year. Because I know that every member of Congress has a staffer assigned to check the notification box on Twitter, right? Because that's how they find out what people think about them. Right? In other words, if they're tagged in a message, then that shows up there, and they can go look at it and go, "Well, boss, people are happy about this, not happy about that." And so, if thousands of messages asking for hearings in January from the Senate Intel Committee start turning up, the staff's going to see that, and they're going to go, ooh. They're going to talk to the member and say, sir, you need to kind of check the notifications box. He will then immediately go to the Twitter page. He will go to notifications, and he'll scroll them. It's real simple, right? Then you have to read them. You just scroll them. I want 100,000. But I can stop there. Okay. They have email. They don't have email addresses. They don't give that out anymore. They have forms. That's just very common. No problem. You fill out a form, you put the message in, you send it. It ends up as an email going into the email box of one of the staffers that monitors the email. 100,000 emails by the end of the year. So 100,000 tagged Twitter messages, 100,000 emails, and the emails are asking for hearings. I have put out protocols about how to handle it, right? These are the good guys. No anger, no threats, no epithets, none of that. Serious, solid, reasoned statements.
And thank yous.
Right.
Yeah.
And thank yous. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask how the average person could help with disclosure. So you're answering that question right here. So
anybody who has access to the internet in the world
can do it.
Can do it. Right?
I think it's really interesting. The Senate Intel Committee is so important here, given that I think if I'm not mistaken, it started in 1975 with the Church Committee, which exposed COINTELPRO, MK Ultra, and Project Mockingbird and other kind of abuses from kind of intelligence community. So it's there is an historical legacy with that committee of exposing things that needed to be exposed. So I think
it's for a reason.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the committee that does that.
Yes.
And let me be clear, the Church Committee was important, but they have had far less of those hearings than they should have.
Yeah.
The overall degree of oversight over the military intelligence complex is a fraction of what it should be, and we're paying a heavy price for that.
Yeah.
A heavy price for that. And so they will hold one of these things once in a while, maybe Iran-Contra, whatever, and people go, oh, but there
Scratching
is
the surface.
simply not enough. It's time for the Congress to be empowered to do its job. Now, I got to tell you, Congress is not behaving right now in a way that incites confidence and empowerment. But we need to think of the Congress as an institution, look past any behavior, and make the point that it's got to be empowered to do true oversight of the abuses of the military intelligence complex of the United States. Because every time we do an abuse, we undermine our moral authority, which makes it harder for it to get anything done or for anybody to care about what we think. This is one of 1,000 things embedded in the disclosure process, right, regarding ETs. I assure you, there's much more involved in this than just, we need to find out there's ETs here. Well, they already know, but they need to confirm it. It's more than that. It gets to the core of some of the most fundamental dysfunctions in the American system. And so there's a lot at stake here in those hearings, which should be held in January. And the point that I make when I can about that, if I could have a lunch with any of those three gentlemen at the Senate restaurant, which would be very nice. I'm only a few blocks away. I'm happy to pick up the tab, but I don't think I'm allowed to. Whatever. The point is that this one, you can't put off these hearings because the world is too much at risk of a major catastrophic event. It could be a terrorist attack beyond even 9/11. It could be a nuclear tactical shell fired off in the Ukraine. It could even be a terrorist nuclear attack because, well, we really don't have a full accounting of all the nuclear materials. For anybody that thinks we do, you're living in la la land. All right. So if that happens, everything is going to be shoved aside, and we're going to be doing nothing but dealing with that for Lord knows how long. And this paradigm shift will not have taken place. We will not have had the opportunity to execute what could be a worldview change. And it can happen tomorrow. We cannot delay. And the second reason is this. We're about to have a very unpleasant, incredibly expensive, embarrassing, awful, nasty, ugly election where a whole lot of candidates, and there's about 2,000 that'll be on the ballots for the House, Senate governorships, about 2,000. A lot of people who otherwise might not are going to make complete asses of themselves. And they're going to be evasive and lie and in general be incredibly partisan. And nobody's really know what the hell they're up to or want by the time they get elected. And it's going to be misery. It's going to be 11 months of sheer hell. Now, on the other hand, if the Senate holds the hearing in September and sets the stage for Biden to finally confirm the extraterrestrial presence that probably half the world's people already know is true, we enter the post-disclosure world right then. And the first primary is probably still over a month away. Forget about the Iowa caucus. Care about the Iowa caucus, right? And so what that means is that in this election goes from being perhaps one of the most awful in modern era to being one of the most profound. Because every one of the 2,000 candidates will have a reasonable amount of time to go read some of these books. Of course, they'll read them on Kindle, but whatever. And watch documentaries and get up to speed to try to understand. It's all been validated. 90% of all the work done by all these citizens for all these decades while they were being told they were fools and idiots and tinfoil hat and paying out of their own pocket and going bankrupt, all of that will be validated immediately. So they can go read it, study. And so these candidates will actually get up on the issue. I mean, it's the biggest issue in the world. It's like nobody's going to campaign and go, well, I know something happened, but I missed it. I don't know.
A little ontological shock might be a good thing for some people.
And so as the candidates go forward, they'll continue to learn and they'll be able to ask their questions and the public will be able to focus on that. They'll be able to focus away from all of the awfulness, all of the bigotry and the hypocrisy and the hyper partisan and all of that stuff. They'll be able to focus away from that on this profound changing reality, and they can ask questions, and the candidates, because it's completely nonpartisan, will be able to actually make intelligent, thoughtful, reasonable statements. Everybody wins. And in the end, we'll have a much better election. It will be a historic election, one that people can be proud of. And when they all get elected, the American people will have at least elected 435 members of the House, 30-some members of the Senate, a bunch of governorships, as well as a lot of important state Senate jobs, with some idea of what these men and women think about the new world that was just handed to them on a silver platter. We'll actually have a sense of what they think. So the post-disclosure reality will be inculcated in the next government of the United States. That is a massive historic win. To not disclose and to have these people running around with non-human tech all the way hanging in the air. By the way, non-human tech is mentioned 3 times in the new bill. Okay, they didn't avoid it. And unable to speak about it, fumbling and mumbling and acting like jackasses. Yeah, that's a disaster. And so the difference between that disaster and historic election sits directly on the shoulders of Senator Schumer, Senator Warner, and Senator Rubio. They are the ones that have the power to call that hearing. The president cannot even call that hearing. He can beg for it. He can lean on them. Assuming he did, he might not, because that would be politicizing it. Only they can really call these hearings. And so I'm asking people to join the shift storm. 1 million tweets, 1 million tag messages. 100,000.
A million if we can.
By the end of the year. All right. Now, I've also told people, if you want to look up their phone number, I didn't post it, but if you want to look up the phone number, it's easy to find, and give a call and say, look, we really would like some hearings. We thank you for your work. Okay, but that's not the storm. Do not storm their phones, because it's very upsetting. It affects their work. It's a mistake. Don't do that. But the odd call, make a call. It's okay. Just don't get carried away. That's nice too. Letters, down. It takes too long to write them, and then they've got to go through the X-ray machine and the Ricin machine, and God knows what else. It takes forever to get there. And so don't send them. So that's the shift storm at shiftstorm. Don't forget the F.org. All right. Join up, folks, and follow me on Twitter at Steve Bassett.
Well, thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll include all those links. And is there anything else you want to ask?
I guess one of the projects you're doing that I'm most excited about, if we have time real quick, is just if you could talk a little about the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. And I think that has the potential for some amazing kind of results. So
this project is activism of a sort. It was my partner, Dan Harari, who is a Hollywood publicist, and I came up with this at a Italian deli. We only meet at, delis now, because that's where all the deals get done in Hollywood. Something about the atmosphere, the smell of pastrami, whatever. You go in there, there's all kinds of cool people. Anyway, it came together then, and it was launched on November 1. What it is modeled after the Environmental Media Association, which was launched in the mid-90s by Norman Lear, who just passed at 100, I think, or 101. He and his wife launched it. He was a rather famous person back then. He was a god of television and very wealthy. And so they launched it with a $1 million awards dinner. And the whole purpose of it was to make it much easier for the entire film industry, and to some extent the entertainment industry, film, television, whatever, to interact with the entire environmental activist movement, right? Which, because it was an activist movement, had its detractors and trollers and what have you and haters, right? They called them fools and idiots and deluded and the usual stuff. Not like the ET issue, which has suffered under decades of belittlement and degradation by institutions. God bless them. But that was to bring them together. It still exists. It's got all kinds of major stars and top end people involved from the beginning. It's done a lot of public relations. I think on the website it talks about 5.5 billion imprints. That was the Environmental Media Association. Well, my partner Dan Harari was one of the publicists that helped start it. And so his idea was, Steve, let's do the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. Yeah, I instantly said yes. And one reason is that back in late 2012, early 2013, I started something called the ET Media Group because I had studio access, a lot of space, and we'd set up the tables. And once a month, we had lists for both UAP people and film people, and we invited people to come and talk about the subject, trying to get them together. There was some interchange and what have you, but it was not really formalized. It was not set up to be a big thing, and ultimately it faded away. But it had a Facebook page and all that kind of stuff. I think it still does, believe it or not. So I did that 10 years ago, and so that was amateur. But what Dan brought up was pro. And so we created the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance at hollywooddisclosurealliance.org. The website is still coming together, but it's up, it's running. And the raison d'etre is easy. Make it much easier, obvious for people in the film industry, the entertainment industry, directors, producers, writers, actors, production people, songwriters, music moguls, whatever, that is heavily concentrated in Los Angeles County, but symbolically represented by the word Hollywood. I get it. Right? Make it as easy as possible for them to connect up with all the UAP researchers, activists, journalists, documentarists, witnesses, even contactees that are talked about in these books behind me, and thousands more, who have been forced to operate under a truth embargo that is coming down. And the film industry knows this. They kind of know it. But they still have to overcome that, that reluctance. Aren't these people a little crazy, or, whatever? No. And there's plenty, there are people that still feel that way in the film industry, but the ones that don't, we're asking them to become founding members. And so we have about 26 founding members on one page. And then we have about 40 some UAP ET members on another page, so they can kind of see each other. And we have a process by which they can get in touch with each other without being very responsible. And of course, anybody else can go there and see this, and they can also see who's the founding members, and that may help them connect. They don't have to do it through the HDA. And the whole purpose of that is not to end the truth embargo, because that's going to happen regardless. It's to create a basis for the content creation in the post-disclosure world. In other words, the day after disclosure, 8 billion people want to know everything about everything immediately, including the whole history of this issue, as well as everything governments have known, and on and on and on and on and on, and all the implications and so forth. It is going to be one of the most extraordinary explosions of content ever in all of history, in terms of the number of books, number of movies, number of docs. Going to go crazy. And the sooner we get going on that, the better. And most importantly, it's essential that the people that carry the water for the last 70 years, who happen to still be alive, be intimately involved in that process, be consulted, worked with, deals made, money made, right? So they can do even more, right? And if the film industry makes billions, God bless them. At least it will be informing the world, not just another tentpole alien movie, which of course they make tons of money, and that's good. And it's made them a lot of money, which I think makes them feel inclined to actually do this. Now, there's two perfect examples of how this is happening and changing. The Hollywood Disclosure Alliance doesn't get credit here, but there are people involved in these two things I'm about to mention, who are members. 1, 2 years ago, one of the biggest studios and most significant people in town, LA town rather, J.J. Abrams, took on a project and completed it, a documentary series called UFO. and dropped it into Showtime. 4 episodes. Highest rated series in the history of Showtime. All right. Boom. Just recently, a few months ago, the man, right? I mean, the man, Steven Spielberg, dropped a 4-part nonfiction series called Encounters. This is just the beginning. And so the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, I mean, they don't need Spielberg doesn't need the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, though I will say that both he and Abrams, meaning their production people, made the mistake of not consulting with the people that have been in my world. And as a result, both of those series have 2 major mistakes that could have been avoided. Yeah. All right. And so, again, I'm not throwing shade at Spielberg and J.J. Abrams. Love you guys. Love you. Watch everything you do. Understand? So that's the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. Now, right now, I have dozens of people in the UAP-ET world that want to be founding members, but I cannot land their plane because right now we're sitting at 2-1. UAP-ET to entertainment industry people. We've got to get more founding members who have some decent time and grade in the entertainment industry to become founding members of the HDA, so I can start bringing in more UAP-ET founding members. There's no limit. It doesn't cost anything. It just means that their bio and photo is up, obviously making them an endorsee of the thing, and also making them contact capable, right? That's what the founding members are for. In other words, they benefit. And we need more. So as we get more of those, I can add more ET people. The other thing I want to emphasize, at least at this point, as it's currently set up, the HDA is completely non-commercial. The nature of this issue and other reasons, HDA is completely non-commercial. It will be a 501c3 nonprofit. It will not sell anything. It will not charge anything, attendance or membership or any of that. It will function based upon donations. And I think we're going to do well there. I believe that there's an awful lot of people that will see the merit of the HDA, and we will get substantial donations that will allow us to do all the things that we want to do. And most certainly, the HDA will in no way be an equity position or partner in any deal. Absolutely not. We are a networking entity, right? The people, and that includes, everybody in it, and that includes me, right? My partner and so forth. We are a networking app, so people can, on their own, get together and do deals and whatever they want to do, and they will be well, they will go poorly. It doesn't matter. We are not involved, right? We are completely independent of that. That is the way things are set up. I hope it stays that way, and that is the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance.
Like a almost kind of Joseph Campbell idea. It's like we're gonna need new myths when this reality does fully hit. So I really appreciate that project, and I'm very excited about it. So
thank you. Again, I'm right now I'm doing more podcasts per week than I've done ever.
Yeah,
I've got 25 more I think scheduled for 2 reasons. One, promote the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance, but also again to get these hearings, to get the Shift Storm. Don't forget the storm.org underway. Again, everybody can participate, right? I do not think, and I need to confirm this. I do not think that sending an email to any of these senators is restricted to state residents. I know that by law, emails, you have to be a resident of a district, congressperson's district, in order to email them through the form. I do not think that's the case for senators. I need to confirm that. If it is the case that, you need to be a resident of the state, I'm just saying, go on Google and whatever and find an address in this state. But email so-and-so and so-and-so at gmail dot blah, 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 blah. Put it in there and just get the message in. Now, I don't think you're breaking a federal law or anything. And some people will go, oh, no, I can't do it. This is activism. The stakes are extremely high, and it's a little good trouble. That's all it is, a little good trouble. But I don't think it's the case, but I need to confirm that so that I can be firm that, yes, there's some good trouble involved here, but you're not going to go to jail. Got to get the message in. And why not? Because these gentlemen control the ability to hold a hearing in front of the Senate Intel Committee that will lead to a confirmation of ET presence, which is going to affect every living person on the planet. And so the idea that you can't get a message to them about that unless you're in New York or Florida, I'm sorry. I'm just not going to go with that.
It is important, and it's a very important message.
The other thing I want to mention here is that, because there's a little confusion about this, the House is involved. I think the way things were planned or supposed to go, the House was basically sit it out, right? In other words, let the Senate Intel do this, it'll come to the House. But the House is kind of proud of itself, and it is one of the two houses of Congress. And so they got involved. They got involved back in July. But they were already involved because one member of the House made some history. And I'm referring to Tennessee Congressman Tim Burchett. Burchett, actually, is how it's pronounced. I think he's got a chunk of Knoxville. He went on News Nation and Fox News and said, there's an extraterrestrial presence here. He was the first member of Congress ever to do that, either sitting member or retired. Never happened. Made history. Done it several times. Talked about non-human tech, too. So he just got way out in front. And instead of getting grief and being trolled and shade being thrown, he went from being a not particularly well-known member of Congress to being a global person, global figure. He's being covered all over the world. And he's doing very well. Thank you very much. And other members saw this, including members of the Oversight Committee, which in the House, which he happens to belong to. And so that set the stage for when Grusch came forward for them, because Grusch wanted immediate hearing. He did not want to wait for the New York Times to vet this. God knows how long that would take. And he wasn't going to wait for the Senate Intel Committee because they weren't ready to do a hearing. So they did it in the subcommittee of the Oversight Committee, thus becoming the first hearing since 1968. 55 years. All right? Now, the key figures that have been driving the House activity, there are a number of people, but the three key people are Senator Burchett, not Senator well, actually, that could very well happen. Congressman Burchett, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, and Congresswoman Nancy Mace. So these are the chief heroes of the House. The heroes of the Senate are Schumer, Warner, Rubio, Gillibrand, Rounds, and I think Reid, who is a sponsor of the last bill. These are the heroes of the Senate, though every single member of the Senate Intel Committee has signed, I think, at least 2 letters, all of them, regarding this issue. I think one was sent possibly to the White House and one was sent to the UAP task force or the equivalent. And so the entire Intel Committee is on board. They're the heroes, but I mentioned the key people. But the House is also playing a factor. And I think putting more pressure, because Congressman Burchett, he will stand in front of any camera and he will say, there's an extraterrestrial presence here. And he's probably going to be doing that. He's going to keep doing it, right? There's no reason he's going to stop. And so Lord knows what's going to turn up next. Even ABC, CBS, or NBC News, who really go out of their way to stay low on this issue. I mean, they just kind of, I don't really want to go there. It's, it's a little awkward. We're like the big three. He may even do it there. Maybe even on George Stephanopoulos' show. But in the meantime, there's plenty of other places where he can go and say it. And soon he's going to be joined by some others. And so you have this situation where more and more people are publicly saying there's an extraterrestrial presence here, while the president is forced to remain silent because he doesn't want to inject himself and politicize this process. Because, everything the president does, including having a dog, gets politicized. Okay. And so it needs to be set up for him by nonpartisan, bipartisan hearings in the Senate. And so it's going to get increasingly awkward. Senator Schumer, Senator Warner, Senator Rubio, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse and worse, but you have the answer. We've got to have those witnesses testify. So.
Also, what are your thoughts on the portion of the population that claims this topic has no effect on them or their lives?
I think there will be plenty of people who this topic will not have an effect on their lives. Well, let me put it this way. They won't feel it. They may not perceive it, but everybody on this planet will be affected, I assure you. In fact, there is nobody that can escape the effect of the disclosure. No one. And whether they recognize it or not doesn't matter. I assure you, their lives are going to be affected. Some in small ways, some in massive ways. It's the biggest paradigm shift in history. It's almost unmeasurable. Nothing compares to it. Nothing comes close to it in terms of the number of people affected in the most number of ways in the shortest amount of time. Nothing comes close to this. And so, yeah, there'll be, but it's okay. I think being chill about it is the way to go. I'm not going to be able to chill, but I think if you got a job and a family or whatever, you got problems and stay chill. All right, don't. There's plenty of other things to be anxious about in the world right now. Right? Tons of stuff. Right? Try not to focus too much on any of it, but I mean, don't add the ET presence being confirmed to your reason for losing sleep. There is ample amount of positive aspects of this, huge potential positive aspects of this, and focus on that because it's true. Now, there may be some negatives as well, but what else is new? But compared to the negatives that we're seeing in our television every single day, you turn on the TV and go, oh my God. Do you realize that in America in particular, so much bad things are happening that you cannot virtually turn on your television and watch news on any day and not be seeing something where it has been edited, cut out, or pixelated so that you can't see it in full because it's so awful. That's the world that we're in now. All right. The ET stuff is not like that. Hopefully there won't be any pixelation needed after disclosure. But again, the ET presence and its confirmation is really not something to get too worried about. And let us hope that confirming the extraterrestrial presence and what happens in the post-disclosure world may, in fact, open the doors to maybe solving some of these things which plague us. And that's one of the metaphors I like to use. I live in an apartment complex. It's got about, 60 units, 70, 80 units. And there's maintenance people there that have a master key to every single one. So they could turn up anytime they wanted to. Think of disclosure as a master key that opens up 1,000 doors that can't be opened now. They don't have the master key. We've tried to break a couple of them down, but they're very sturdy doors. This opens them all, which means that in post-disclosure world, all those things behind those doors suddenly become accessible to be considered, factored into our affairs, our thinking, our worldview, that they're shut off from us now. That's the way to think about it. And we're not required by law to only go through one door at a time. We can go through all 1,000 of them if we want to, and we probably will, because there's a lot of people and a lot of institutions, got a lot of money. We can go through those doors and start seeing what needs to be seen. That's what disclosure is, in my view. That's the metaphor I like the most. People that see that, I think, are getting pretty fired up. So let's see what happens.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Steve. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Or
a little promo. Please follow me at Steve Bassett on Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn. Check it out. I'm also on Facebook. Paradigm Research Group Unlimited, but I've got maybe 5 people left and my friends on Facebook. So that's a little limited, but you can follow me on Facebook. I will be speaking at the Conscious Life Expo. There'll be about 20,000 people there, we think, this year. That's going to be in February at LAX Hilton. You can easily find it. I need to get links up on my site, or at least more prominent. I'll also be speaking at the Contact in the Desert Conference. That is May 30 to June 3 at Indian Wells Resort, a Renaissance Hotel. This is a big deal. I'm also helping to produce it. We'll probably have twice as many people this time. It could be a big time celebration. And so you want to be there at the Contact in the Desert. The weather's great. And it's going to be huge. But let me be clear. When you buy your tickets is one thing. But if you want to be in the hotel at Indian Wells, you need to book your rooms right now. If you want to get a room elsewhere that isn't going to cost you, college tuition, you need to book them now. Do not wait. A month, 2 months, 3 months. Don't do that. I'm telling you, there's not going to be rooms within miles. All right, and they're going to be expensive. Of course, you get a discount on the Renaissance room. That's a given. But book them now, folks. That's just letting you know. Beyond that, have I got anything else? No. That's it.
Well, thank you so much. And
yeah, we really appreciate your work, Steve, and thank you for taking the time to do this with us tonight. So thank you so much.